Hello friends, I'm Kayla. This is my May wrap up. I'm going to talk about all the books I read in the last month. It went by really quickly and I didn't read a lot of wins. And the only thing that I dislike more than not liking the books that I'm reading is having to talk about the books that I didn't like reading. So let's try to get through this quickly. And the challenge that I've given myself today is to review 2 books at once, because that'll make things go by quickly. Here are my stats. As you can see, I had more like 2 and 3 stars than 4 and 5 stars. It's not that I hated everything. It's that I didn't feel a joy of reading this month. I also DNF'd a lot, but we'll have to talk about that in a separate video. I'm not going in order of the books here. I'm just pulling 2 out that I think I can give the same review for. I haven't planned any of this except for my first pairing because I was thinking I'm going to say the same thing about both of these books. So we've got She Weeps Each Time You're Born by Quan Berry and an arc that was kindly sent to me, The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. This book is the second time I've read from this author. I'm giving this book 2 stars. The book was short. The writing style was unique and very lyrical, and I got completely lost in the plot because I think form overtook function. I think that's what people say. What I said in the video when I read this one was that the stylistic choices were very much the focus. It reads like poetry. It's beautiful. I can see that it's beautiful. It's metaphorical. There's a lot of allusions. There's a lot of things that you can decipher. And to that point, it's very hard to decipher the plot, or it was for me. And then I read this one and I felt the same about it. So this is about a mermaid and a plague doctor and a prince. And there's a lot of body horror. They travel to this town of children and the children may be evil. I think it has a lot to say. I think this book has a lot to say about how people have been treated throughout history, in society, in different places. In this one, a main character we're following gets buried and rescued and can now speak to the dead. We're following years of their life. We're following stories that we get to hear about. They give you a picture of the place that this is set in Vietnam. These people live horrific and beautiful lives, and I just got lost. I really got lost in the plot. I don't know what they're about. It was about the writing of it all, and I could not appreciate it the way that I wanted. Now the question is, where do we go next? I want to talk about Funny Feelings. I didn't read any other romance. Well, we've got Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt and The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reed. These were between 2 and 3 stars. 2, 3 stars. This is a romance book that felt like maybe it was its first draft, and if there were a couple more years put into it, a couple more rounds of editing, maybe it could turn into something that I enjoy. Though there are high reviews out there for these, so obviously this book does not need to change. But in this book, we're following characters who I don't necessarily understand why they're in love. So in The Wolf and the Woodsman, we're following a girl named Eva Kay. She comes from a village where everybody has magic except for her, and people are regularly gifted to the king, and these woodsmen come and take these wolf people, they're just people, to the king. And Eva Kay gets gifted, sacrificed. There's a lot of travel, there's a lot of connection. Her and the woodsman get to know each other. There are some revelations that we have, and then once we get to the kingdom, I was completely uninterested in the plot because the goal and things just changed. It's a mutual loathing situation. This is a mutual pining situation, and in a fake dating book, which is one of the reasons that I was kind of interested in this, or why it was pitched to me as something that I would enjoy, is the fake dating. But when you also have mutual pining from basically page 3, it loses like the tension for me. Neither of these books necessarily felt natural. The writing style of this didn't really match the main character's vocabulary, and the writing of this and the dialogue specifically just did not feel like the way human beings speak, just in my opinion, or in a way that I enjoy, I guess. This did have a lot to do with celebrities. These people are comedians, and I didn't know there was an age gap. I didn't know it was a manager-client situation. I didn't realize how much celebrity stuff would be involved, and audience members and the press, and trying to put on this fake relationship for people to comment on. This book has been directly recommended to me in a sense, and I'm sad that I didn't like it the way that other people have. And hey, this book is also around 400 pages. Did I do okay? I think I'm doing okay. Next, let's grab The Marvelous by Claire Kahn and Stripped to the Bone by Ghada Alatrash. You might be wondering why. And me too. I would say this book should have been a different genre and I would have liked it more. That's the only thing I've got. I can't pair this with another nonfiction and I can't pair this with another like YA because I liked these significantly less and I can't think of anything else they really have in common. But this is about a group of teens who go and stay in this mansion resort getaway. There's a woman who runs an app and she invites certain people to this weekend. And when they get there, they realize they're competing for a cash prize and they have to participate in all of these contests and decipher these riddles. And I think it should have been fantastical. I think these girls should have had powers. I think what they were supposedly deciphering should have been like the takedown of this like evil creature rather than this kind of unrealistic evil woman. And then we could also have them creating spells because there's this interesting recipe following building that I think could have led to like a potion or a spell. I gave this book somewhere around 2 or 3 stars. This one I think should have been nonfiction. The intent is obviously to shed light on the challenges Syrian people are facing, have faced throughout time. You can tell it was written with great passion and empathy and understanding and research, but it was messy to read. Each portrait of a woman starts with a poem, goes into a couple pages of their unique experience or perspective on the world or questions they have about other parts of the world, about humanity, and then ends with an epilogue. A lot of the stories are taken up by footnotes, a lot of explanations of what certain terms mean, where names come from, and I think that she would do a fantastic job in giving a history, in giving us real people. Maybe form overtook function, is that even the right phrase, in this one too, because I don't think every story needed to start with a poem and needed and felt like it was right to have an epilogue, but because that was a consistent thread, and like I love organization and consistency, but it didn't really feel necessary to some of them. So I would have a hard time recommending this book directly to many people. I'd have to know your reading taste really well before knowing if it would be for you. Next up, I'm going to pair The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi with Reluctant Immortals by Gwendolyn Keist. This was a book I enjoyed the majority of the time, and it wove in storytelling things and was in a sense retellings of various stories, which is always fun. And it had A+ commentary on all of the things that it wanted to say. It was very successful in that. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride follows this woman named Indigo, and she's getting married and she tells her bridegroom to not look into her past or it'll ruin everything. And obviously he decides to look more into it, and we get all of these stories from Indigo's life before, a long time ago. And the story is a lot of perspective and people's experiences with Indigo. I feel like there is a kind of twist in here that's really easy to see from the beginning, and it doesn't ruin it if you figure it out, but there was a point about halfway where I thought the book was teasing it was going in a different direction and it was about to reveal something else that I thought was far more interesting in my mind than the twist we actually got. So I think this book should have ended differently. For Reluctant Immortals, this is a reimagining of Lucy from Dracula and Bertha from Jane Eyre. It brings in a lot of characters from their origin stories and gives them a different story, maybe a story that they deserve more. I gave this one a 3. I gave this one a 4. I just think this should have ended sooner. It was really road trippy. It was very action packed. It was a lot of racing around trying to find someone the entire time, and I don't know that it knew what it wanted to say, and it said it, but then it said it and it said it and it said it and it said it over and over again, and I feel like I got the point halfway through, and then it should have ended when it accomplished all of its goals and it wasn't just continually like chasing somebody down. So maybe I would say it focused more on the side characters and plot stuff and I thought it could have been more of an intimate story between just these two women. Next, let's talk about The World Gives Way by Marissa Levian and Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. There is a relationship at the heart of this, but mainly it is about a young woman and the circumstances she's in and just figuring stuff out. Also, what I would say about this book is it would have gotten a higher rating from me if the perspectives were different. So 3, 4. The World Gives Way has a woman, a young girl, I don't remember how old she is, she's in servitude. There is this giant spaceship that she's born on, her generations have been. They had to escape Earth, and now they've created this spaceship that is essentially a planet of its own, and they're traveling to a certain destination. They won't get there for many, many years, and poor people in society couldn't afford to escape, so they were put into these positions, given this opportunity to serve others. And our main character, Mira, gets the opportunity to escape or find freedom earlier than she expected, but now she's responsible for this baby because she was caring for her and both of her parents died in a certain circumstance. So there's a bit of a mystery going on. And then the other perspective we're following is this guy whose name I don't even remember. Oh, his name's not even in the description. Tobias. He is a kind of police officer in this world, and he is chasing her down because she has escaped. Essentially, I think there could have been a lot more commentary on that entire situation, but it was more about them learning about each other, the future that they had. There's certain things they need to save or stop from happening or learn. And I think if we had a bunch of perspectives, if this was maybe even a little bit weird, because the ship that they're on is a little bit weird, maybe the ship could have had dialogue. Maybe we could have gotten in the head of a lot of different people instead of these back and forths that were kind of just like chasing each other through a good amount of the book. I think I could have liked it more. And then Last Night at the Telegraph Club, on the flip side, had some perspectives. They were short. They didn't ruin the book whatsoever, but I just don't think it needed them. We're following this main girl named Lily, but before each like section, there's 6 or 7 sections, we get one of her family members and an experience that they had in the past. We get to learn about some different people, and I just don't think it needed that, because we could have learned about them and from them through something else, like letters or her just talking about them and interacting with them. But Lily is questioning her identity. She's 17 years old in 1954 San Francisco, and there's a lot of deportation happening. There's talk of communism, and she is just figuring out her queer identity and wondering who, if anyone, is going to accept her. She learns that there is this lesbian bar called the Telegraph Club that she gets welcomed into, but also there are raids going on and people are trying to obviously shut down anywhere or arrest anyone who they think is doing wrong in their eyes. The government, the police, what have you. And it's about her finding this safe space, and there is a relationship that she gets into, and it's a sad story for a lot of it, but it's also really beautiful, and I just think it's incredibly well done. So I gave it a 4. Now we've made it halfway, and I'm definitely going to struggle more with making these pairings. So let's actually feature some of my top reads of the month, and they're both nonfiction, and I have no notes for them. Even though this one was more of a 4, this one was more of a 5. So this is a nonfiction memoir book. It's informative, it's heavy, and I thought it was really good. So A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier by Ishmael Bia. I learned that a lot of people have read this because it is taught in schools. It's something that a lot of people, I think specifically in America, have read in class. So it kicks off in Sierra Leone, and our author is just telling us the story of his life, getting taken and put into the life of a soldier. All of these children who have been fed drugs and been taught who to fear and who they need to kill in order to survive and succeed. It's obviously really heavy and eye-opening how he survived these circumstances, the people he met along the way. This follows, like, it's only 224 pages, but a good amount actually happens in here. And then there's a great timeline in the back as well that covers a lot of events. But it's just about where he ended up, the atrocities that he faced, how he doesn't have memory of certain things as well, recovering from drug addiction because these children are just pumped full of like cocaine and handed guns. And it's about who he actually is as a person and figuring out what he cares about and his passions. It's all sad. And then A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. This one is an essay collection. My favorites were definitely the first one. I think she just does a really excellent job of mixing together 2 to 3 different topics in one essay and never losing sight of either one of them, but making them meld together in just such an excellent, expert way that I can't even believe. Like, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground is the very first one, and she's talking about a history of depression, how depression was, like how it's been treated throughout history, how it's been understood. And then also it's a whole conversation about like the word depression, where the origin comes from. She is an Indigenous woman, so there's a lot of conversation about stolen language as well. How Indigenous people are treated differently, how Indigenous mental health is treated differently. And all of that ties together and comes in and out in this one essay, and it's so fantastically done. And then the other one that really stood out to me that I made a whole Instagram post about is called I don't know how to pronounce it, Sontag in Snapshots. And I literally had to throw out my highlighter at the end of this because it ran out of ink because I was highlighting everything. She's talking about photography and how like people have gone around to different communities they don't belong to and like documented different groups of people, Indigenous communities that they see as like dying out, and oh, I need to document this for future generations because no one will ever get to see this. And it's about how photographers take it upon themselves to craft their own truth, and then the relationship between the agency of the photographer and the lack of agency of the subject, and how you can spin any story that you want. But then also it talked about her relationship as a person being photographed, how uncomfortable it makes her and why, and how people are obsessed with photographing and creating memories of things, like going to the Rocky Mountains and taking photos and preserving them in that way. But not enough people are focused on preserving the actual natural beauty for future generations. And it's just about like taking this photo and that's all we have and we love it and we appreciate it, but not the actual landmark. And then there was also this conversation about like selfies and women and body image all tied together. And at no point were any of these essays like confusing. They all had such clear direction and they were so well organized. And that's just 2 examples of so many things that were talked about here. There's things about society in general, but then also just personal anecdotes from her life. It was excellent and it's one of my most recommended memoirs, I think. Next, I'm gonna do a couple mystery books that didn't totally land for me. So this is Arsenic and the Azaleas by Dale Meyer and Her 3 Lives by Kate Holohan. This is a mystery book that I gave between 2 and 3 stars. Again, lower 2, higher 2, or a 3, where the main characters are women and they are in or have recently been in marriages that are really messy with rich husbands. What else? As mystery books, they were not satisfying to solve and didn't lend themselves well to that type of experience. So in Arsenic and the Azaleas, it's a woman who's moving to her dilapidated grandmother's house and she immediately finds a dead body on the property and she inserts herself into the investigation, and that's pretty much it. The clues that you get are only given to you right before she makes some big realization or right after she has made a grand assumption that just turns out to be true. So it's not one that you can necessarily solve, though I did try. I did try to solve it in the video that I read this for. I think what I struggled with most here is the main character is not interesting. I think especially in a cozy mystery, you need a character who has some type of personality trait that you want to read. She's usually quirky or funny, or she has a passion for something, she really cares about her family, or she's come from something, she has this dark secret. Maybe she's bumbling around, maybe she's a loner, maybe she's really popular. She has something. She has like one attribute to grab onto. This woman does not. She has absolutely no interesting characteristics that make you relate to her or care about her in any way, or at least I didn't. So it was not a great one, but I am going to read more in the series because it's set where I live. And I must. And then Her 3 Lives by Kate Holohan, I think I will read from this author again because At this point, I don't dislike the writing, and a lot of mystery books, I dislike the writing right from the beginning and I never finish them. I do think she has good things going on in her books and she's saying good things. So I think like 5 more books from now, I would pick up from her again and see how her writing has improved. Not that it needs to, but just for me and my tastes. Because this is the 2nd book I've read from her and another like 3-ish star. This is about a home invasion. She just married this man, or she's about to marry this man who is super rich, and he already has a family. He's just getting divorced. He has grown children, and they experience this home invasion. And after it, he's super paranoid, validly, puts cameras all over the house, and then starts to take advantage of the ability to see what's going on in the house and watches her every move. What room she's in when she leaves and comes into the house. She has something going on in her past that he thinks she's hiding from him. So at one point he like follows her with a drone to see what she's up to, like out at coffee. I had another issue with assumptions in this one. It's not that every assumption panned out, it's that none of them panned out and they were never going to. So every single time she had a thought of who, you know, broke into the house, who is after her, who's sending her these letters, who knows about her deep dark past, it never panned out. It was like all of these red herrings, but you knew as the reader they were going to be. So I feel like there was a lot of wasted time in here, but the mystery itself and like who it turned out to be, I was interested in certain things about it. So that's that. What do we have next? I do see 2 horror up here that I feel like I'm gonna have to pair together. So that's Bad Cree by Jessica Johns and Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman. This one was again an ARC sent to me kindly by the publisher, and this one is a Literally Dead book club pick. So we are having a live show on Saturday to discuss this. So I'll keep it kind of brief. I've already talked about this in a video. These were horror, really mixed with mystery. So there was a mystery plot we were following for a good portion of the book, which made it interesting to follow. I ended up giving this one a 3, this one a 4, or maybe a 3, a high 3. I haven't figured it out yet. The themes of this book include family dynamics, confronting your past, loneliness, and challenging what is real and what's not. So in Bad Cree, we have this woman who can take things in and out of her dreams, and she recently lost her sister and she thinks she's getting messages from her sister from beyond the grave. And she is dealing with a lot of that alone and is just very isolated. She's isolated herself. She ends up reconnecting with family, and that's a big portion of the book, is her returning to where she came from, a town in Alberta. And her family is going through the same thing that she is. They're also grieving along with her and experiencing things and have certain knowledge that she comes to understand, and they work together as a unit to figure out what is happening and where these messages are coming from, and if there's this entity they need to confront. It had fantastic atmosphere. I think the horror elements didn't go as far as I wanted when they happened in the book. There was a lot of repetitive dream sequences as well that I didn't end up feeling like added a lot, and this could have been more enjoyable for me as like a short story. Though I think it delivers on the topics and the themes it wants to, it wasn't the most interesting plot overall. And in Whisper Down the Lane, we're following this guy who's a teacher, and we're getting back and forth like dual timeline scenes from him as a child when there was this satanic panic in the 80s and everybody was looking for an excuse to blame somebody or find a reason for what's going on. So like everyone was expecting their teenagers and their children to be taken by the devil, and they were looking for imagery and finding symbolism everywhere. Since this is inspired by a real case, it ended up being a group of people responsible for these children being accused of demonic things, rituals, and harming these children. And the question is, did it really happen or not? Much like this book didn't deliver the exact horror that I wanted or was expecting, this might be the case for a lot of people as well. The low ratings that I've seen, people talk about how they thought it was literally going to be a demon possession horror kind of story. Personally, I think it did deliver the horror, just in a different way. And the audiobook really lent itself well to that. Sometimes it can come off a little bit cheesy when you're reading from the perspective of children and the language that they're using, and also the people interviewing these children and trying to get them to confess by any means necessary are using certain tools, and like there's this one part where he talks to like this puppet, and physically reading it could come off a little bit cheesy, but the audiobook just felt so insidious to me that it absolutely gave the atmosphere that I wanted from it. It was definitely a hard read at many points. I think there's a lot to unpack in the live show, so I'm looking forward to that. Next up, the only thing I can think about here is we've got some weird short fiction. This one is a novella. This is a short story collection. So we've got Feed Them Silence by Lee Mandelow and Peach Pit, a collection of stories about evil women. How does it explain itself? Fierce and dangerous women. It's about revenge and moral grayness. I did not rate these the same. I gave this a 4. There were some stories in here that I gave a 4, but overall I think I have to rate this collection a 3. It's tough because it started out with a couple 5s. Fuckboy Museum by Disha Philyaw and Collar by K Ming Chan were my favorites in here. They were about a woman reflecting on her dating escapades. And interestingly, one that I said reminded me of Our Wives Under the Sea. Like if you liked the vagueness of it, you would like, and I also said the same about this. So maybe that's the vibe. But then a lot of the other stories were 3s. Most things in here were a 2 or a 3. We had stories of 2 women and their relationship with the same man. There was a pageant story that had me laughing out loud. One with a woman whose mother was a narcissist. One that was interesting about this world where like there was robots and like these suits that protected you from assault. I didn't end up rating that one very highly, but it was an interesting concept. We had one where I feel like it was like a metaphor of giving up parts of yourself. I don't know if it's intentional, but there was a very clear arc to me in here of how evil these women were, or not an arc, whatever the opposite of an arc is. It kicked off with women who you could clearly see like were doing fucked up things, were having fucked up thoughts, and like being like getting revenge and just wanting to be gritty. I don't know. And then it kind of went into, are these characters like, are they actually doing bad things? I don't know. And then it picked back up again. I would give you like every trigger under the sun for this. It definitely got darker than I think I was expecting. It's more like Cursed Bunny than Out There. It was also a lot less plot than I was expecting. I think a lot of these stories were like musings. There was just like a conversation, it was a letter to someone, it was like one scene, and there wasn't a lot of things that felt like clearly established stories and plots. There were some at the beginning, and then it lost that, and I started enjoying the stories less as the book went on. Because I love about knowing the organization of a collection like this. I would have liked if, you know how they always come with like the contributors, a section explaining who the author is, what they've written before. I would have liked that to be at the beginning of each story, and then give a little thought from the editors of why they wanted to include it, or even a summary of the story. Because I struggle when talking about short stories sometimes in a collection. Sorry, my eyelashes are having an issue. How much to talk about, like what is a spoiler in a short story? You know what I mean? I never know how much to talk about. So I think I would have liked a little blurb that I see sometimes that goes, this is the story of this and this and how they deal with this. So I know how much of the plot I should even be talking about, because I don't know what to cover. I also just like hearing other people geek out about stories, so I would have liked to hear why the story was selected, or the prompt that was given to the author, or how it all ended up in here. I would definitely recommend this to people who like weird fiction, who've read from any of these authors. I know that I know a lot of people who have read Channa Porter and Lauren Groff. So I think if you were already interested in it, it's going to deliver exactly what you want. Weird fiction following unsavory women are like a hit or a miss. You know, they're such a mix for me. And that was true with the stories. And then Feed Them Silence is about these women. Their marriage is crumbling, and we have one main character who's a scientist, and she's trying to share a mind with a wolf, and the technology has been developed so she can share a consciousness and feel what it is to be a wolf. It sounds weird. It's not a weirdly written story. It doesn't have weird writing. It's a very straightforward plot. We're following the scientific research, we're following the workplace dynamics, we're following this married couple and their constant arguing because one of them is obsessed with their work, and so obsessed that they would rather choose this alternate reality, this virtual reality, than the reality they've created for themselves. I think there's a lot of takeaways in here, conversations about relationships and obsession, and escapism. I've seen this tagged as like horror science fiction, and I understand where people are coming from, and sometimes the things that I'm comparing it to are also kind of horror. I wouldn't say this feels like sci-fi horror in the way that I've experienced it before. It's more about this marriage, and it just happens to have this strange technology involved. And then what do we have last? Two books that could probably not be more different. Something in the Water by Catherine Steadman and 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Here's what I could say. This book is good and very popular, and I understand the popularity. It has a lot of readers. That's the reason that I read it to begin with in the video that I did. And also, it features a body of water. There's an ocean in here that kicks off a lot of events. And the Buendia family, their ocean is a swamp, and it's making them very isolated. So it's about isolation. This is about isolation too, because in here we're following a newlywed couple, a husband and wife, and they're on their honeymoon, and they discover something in the water, and they have to decide if they can trust anyone else with what they've found, if they can trust each other, and if they can trust themselves. No, I don't know. It's one of those actually, these were difficult reads, even though I rated them highly. This one just is magical realism and has very confusing language. If it wasn't for the length of it, I would have probably put it in the same category as the two at the very bottom of my stack now. That I started out with saying that the plots were indecipherable, but maybe if they were hundreds of pages longer, I would have the opportunity to find the plot, and I did in this one. But it still made it like a very long read, obviously. This one is exhausting to read because it's one of those mystery books where you're following a main character who is making awful decisions, and decisions that are probably very different from what you would be doing. It's the kind of thing like when you're watching a horror movie and you're like, why are you going upstairs right now? Like, it feels like that. It feels like Finley Donovan when you're watching her make all of these mistakes, like touching something she shouldn't be, making a phone call, leaving traces of her places. The dynamic between all the characters in here I think is fascinating. Learning what you learn, whether or not you can see the twists and turns coming, which I couldn't always, definitely makes for a fast-paced, interesting time once the mystery actually kicks off. Half the book is just this relationship, and I loved it because I thought the writing was really solid. And then once the action picked up, I was completely on board. Again, with this one, once I fully understood what was happening and just got immersed into the language and the world, I started to really enjoy it. This one is just about this family, and it's about time, how the past, future, and present are all happening at the same time. There are all of these members of a family who are following it for many generations, and it's how isolated they are, how they can't escape all the things that they're experiencing. So when it rains for 5 years straight. When they're awake for days because there is this plague of insomnia. Their lives are just as exhausting as the reader is reading through all of these people who all have the same names and all have the same character attributes, but they're different people. Oh, something else these have in common is this book was on my TBR for like 3 to 4 years. I'm so excited I got to them. This was a 4-point-something star, and this was a 4-star. I think upon reread, I could enjoy this even more, and everybody says like the more you read it, the more you actually understand everything. Those are the 20 things that I read in May. Thank you so much for watching and letting me run through these all with you. Let me know if you're gonna plan on reading any of them now, or if we have similar or differing thoughts about any of these titles, and I'll see you later. Thank you so much for watching. I think I said that. Bye.